That's Aryna, that's crazy.
That was my moment. That was so much fun. You know what? It's so funny, actually, guys.
The Rome crowd always picks a side. They picked Alex Eala's side before the Italian Open even began. Tournament organizers knew it. Scheduling documents reflected it. Center court logistics were rewritten around a 19-year-old Filipino wildcard who had just beaten 3 Grand Slam champions in Miami as a wildcard ranked number 140, something no player in WTA history had done before. Aryna Sabalenka noticed. Of course she noticed. She arrived in Rome as the number 1 seed, carrying a 9-match WTA 1000 winning streak. She had just completed the Sunshine Double. She had just beaten Coco Gauff in the Miami final. By every measurable standard, this was her season, her moment, her city. Nobody was trash-talking the Queen's credentials, at least not openly. The Rome crowd did not get the memo. And then the quarterfinal happened. A first-ever loss to Zheng Qinwen, a fan calling her out mid-match, a destroyed composure, an obscenity, a code violation, a stunned Foro Italico audience watching the Queen completely come undone. Sabalenka instantly regrets how that night unfolded.
I didn't expect that, to be honest, and I'm super proud, super happy, super honored, and honestly...
She said as much, just not about Rome specifically. Hit subscribe. The perspective we're about to give you is one mainstream coverage deliberately buried. What the scoreboard hid is far more interesting. What the scoreboard hid is far more interesting, and it starts not in Rome, but 6 weeks earlier, on a hard court in Miami, where a 19-year-old Filipino wildcard quietly dismantled every assumption the tennis world had built about who belongs at the top of this sport. Alex Eala walked into the 2025 Miami Open ranked number 140. She left it as a phenomenon, not because she got lucky, not because her opponents had bad days, because she executed under pressure against 3 different Grand Slam champions on the biggest hard-court stage outside the majors. She beat Jelena Ostapenko, rallying from 4-0 down in the first set. She beat Madison Keys, the reigning Australian Open champion, 6-4, 6-2, making her the first Filipino player in the Open era to defeat a Grand Slam champion at tour level. Then she beat Iga Swiatek, 6-2, 7-5, coming back from 4-2 down in the second set to close it out. She became the first wildcard in WTA history to beat 3 Grand Slam champions in straight sets at a single event. The second lowest-ranked woman ever to reach the Miami semifinals. The first Filipino to crack the WTA Top 100, jumping from number 140 to number 75 overnight. Her semifinal ended against Jessica Pegula in a match that finished after midnight. 3 sets, a comeback from a set and a breakdown. Pegula needed every ounce of experience she had to get through it, and she said so publicly afterwards. The point is this: Eala did not just make a run, she rewired how the tennis world was thinking about the next generation, and she did it at a tournament where Aryna Sabalenka was also competing, also winning, completing the Sunshine Double on the same grounds. 2 women, same tournament, completely different headlines. Sabalenka won the title, Eala won the narrative. And in professional sports, those 2 things are not always the same currency. By the time the clay season arrived, the tension between those 2 realities had nowhere left to hide. Eala had skipped a lower-tier clay event in Catalonia to focus entirely on the Italian Open. She was not treating Rome as a learning experience. She was treating it as a target.
So Emma needs to be in charge. She's old enough to know what she should be doing and surround herself with people.
The draw placed her in Sabalenka's half of the bracket. The tennis world started doing the math. And in the days before the tournament began, both players were hitting with the same practice partner, American prospect Iva Jovic, on consecutive days at the Foro Italico. One day, Jovic was working with Eala. The next day, she was working with Sabalenka. 2 players from completely different ends of the sport's hierarchy, separated by 24 hours on the same practice court, preparing for the same draw. Then the tournament started, and the math fell apart immediately.
And it's brought me blessings in terms of that sense of community everywhere I go.
Marta Kostyuk destroyed Eala 6-0, 6-1 in the first round, in just over an hour. Eala won 0 break points. She won just 17.2% of her return points. She could not find any rhythm, any foothold, anything. It was the kind of match that happens in clay court tennis when one player is dialed in and the other simply cannot adjust fast enough. Kostyuk was in the form of her life. She had just won the Madrid Open title days before arriving in Rome, and she showed exactly that level in every match she played. After beating Eala, she beat Daria Kasatkina, then Leylah Fernandez, before eventually running into Sabalenka in the round of 16. That match, Sabalenka versus Kostyuk, is worth looking at carefully, because it reveals something important about the difficulty of what Eala faced. Sabalenka, the world number 1, carrying a 9-match WTA 1000 winning streak, needed 2 hours and 5 minutes to beat Kostyuk 6-1, 7-6, 8. She erased the first 12 breakpoints she faced before Kostyuk finally converted her 13th. Kostyuk led 5-3 in the second set and served for it. Sabalenka broke back, survived a set point in the tiebreak, and only closed it out on her third match point with a drop shot. The same player who eliminated Eala in 62 minutes pushed the world number 1 to the absolute edge of a 2-set match. That is not a footnote, that is the actual context of Eala's Rome exit, one that the 6-0, 6-1, and she's exposed narrative conveniently ignored. But Eala was not finished in Rome. She still had the doubles draw. Partnered for the first time with Coco Gauff, the Eala-Gauff combination opened with a 6-3, 6-1 win over Alexandra Panova and Fanny Stoller, then followed it with a 6-2, 6-3 victory over Italian wildcards in the round of 16. That set up a quarterfinal against defending champions Jasmine Paolini and Sara Errani, two of the most experienced doubles players on clay, playing at home with the entire Italian crowd behind them. Eala and Gauff took them to the absolute limit. They led 5-3 in the first set with a 40-0 lead before the veterans clawed back. They dominated the second set to level the match. The super tiebreak went deep before Paolini and Errani eventually won 7-5, 3-6, 10-7 in 1 hour and 39 minutes. The teenager who had been blanked in singles on day 1 had pushed two legends to a super tiebreak in the quarterfinals on day 8, in front of a crowd that was not rooting for her, in a stadium that was built for the other team.
Not for the first time, almost beaten by the lack of pace on serve. So, victory.
That image matters more than people gave it credit for at the time. Now here is the part of the Rome story that everyone saw but nobody properly framed. The same day Eala and Gauff were pushing Paolini and Errani to the limit in doubles, Aryna Sabalenka walked onto Campo Centrale for her quarterfinal against Zheng Qinwen, and everything unraveled. Zheng had never beaten Sabalenka before, not once in 6 previous meetings. Sabalenka had beaten her in the 2024 Australian Open final. She had beaten her in the Miami quarterfinals just weeks before arriving in Rome, extending that head-to-head to 6-0. This match looked like a formality on paper. What happened instead was one of the most complete performances Zheng had produced all season. She won 82% of her first service points. She saved all 5 break points she faced. Sabalenka generated break chances and converted none of them. The final score was 6-4, 6-3 in 97 minutes. Zheng's first career win over the world number 1. During that loss, with Sabalenka visibly struggling and the match slipping away, a spectator in the crowd called out mid-point, "Come on, Aryna, play tennis." Sabalenka turned and snapped back at full volume, "Shut the fung up." The chair umpire issued a code violation for audible obscenity immediately. No hesitation. It was loud, it was caught on broadcast, and it traveled around the internet within hours. This is where the title of this video earns its weight. Because the trash-talking framing is not about a single quote Sabalenka directed at Eala. It is about attitude. It is about the structural dismissal that happened when the world number 1's camp complained about scheduling in Miami, about her match being moved, about center court being reorganized around Eala's fan base. Tournament director James Blake had openly said Eala needed to be on the main court because of her global following, because it would feel like a home match for her fans. Sabalenka, the champion, the defending Miami title holder, was publicly objecting to logistical decisions that had been made in Eala's honor. That is not a neutral posture. That is a queen noticing that someone else is getting her throne prepared for them and not being gracious about it. And then Rome happened. The code violation, the lost composure, the quarterfinal exit, the scoreboard that could not hide any of it. The regret that followed was not isolated to one night in Rome. It became a thread running through the rest of Sabalenka's 2025. At Roland Garros, weeks later, she reached the final and lost to Coco Gauff in 3 sets. What came next was the most damaging press conference of her career. She told reporters that Gauff had won not because she played incredible tennis, but because Sabalenka had made all the mistakes. She suggested Swiatek would have beaten Gauff had she reached the final instead. She called it the worst final she had ever played. The backlash globally was immediate and severe. Gauff pushed back directly in her own press conference, holding the trophy and saying she simply did not agree with that assessment. The story did not end there. Sabalenka spent the following weeks in damage control. She wrote a private apology letter to Gauff. She gave an interview to Eurosport Germany and called her own behavior completely unprofessional. She said she had let her emotions get the better of her and that she absolutely regretted what she had said. She admitted she had needed time to go back and look at it honestly. She reached out to make sure Gauff understood that she absolutely deserved the title and that the respect was real. Then, right before Wimbledon, the two players posted videos together on social media.
We can be on it again in affirming the right of women and girls to sex-based spaces.
Dancing, laughing, publicly closing the chapter. At Wimbledon, Sabalenka walked into her post-loss press conference after a semi-final defeat and immediately said, "Are you guys waiting for something? You're not going to see a Roland Garros press conference." She delivered it as a joke. The room laughed. But the fact that she referenced it herself, unprompted first sentence, tells you how deep that wound actually ran. This is the arc of 2025 that Rome sits at the beginning of. Not the whole story. The starting point. The moment where the cracks first appeared in public, where the emotional volatility that would define her season showed itself on a clay court in front of a Roman crowd. While a teenager she had been forced to take notice of was still fighting for every point across the complex. Eala, for her part, never once responded to any of it publicly. She gave interviews about compartmentalization, about staying in the moment, about being professional, about wanting to inspire Filipino tennis. The contrast in how these two players handled adversity in Rome was not subtle. One left with a code violation and a trophyless quarterfinal exit. The other left with a doubles run that nobody expected and a reputation that had survived a 6-0, 6-1 singles humiliation completely intact. The scoreboard said Sabalenka was the better player in Rome in 2025. By ranking, by results, by titles won, she was. But that is the narrowest possible way to read what happened at the Foro Italico that week. The full picture is messier, more human, and far more revealing about both of these players. Sabalenka is still the best player in the world. That is not under dispute. But in Rome, in that quarterfinal, in front of that crowd, she showed that dominance has a ceiling. And that ceiling is not always technical. Sometimes it is emotional. Sometimes the opponent who gets to you the most is not standing across the net. Sometimes it is a 19-year-old who took your scheduling slot in Miami, outshone your title run with a wildcard semifinal, and then showed up in your tournament half in Rome without flinching. What happened in Rome in May 2025 looks very different from the official version, and now you have seen exactly why. The tennis world moved on quickly. It always does. Next tournament, next draw, next headline. But the players remember. The moments that expose something real do not disappear just because the scoreboard resets. Sabalenka carried Rome into Paris. Paris followed her to Wimbledon.
I absolutely love New York. I love the crowd playing in front of everybody and being back in New York.
And Eala kept climbing, quietly, methodically, without a single apology letter to write. If you made it this far, you already know this channel gives you the angles that the mainstream coverage skips. Hit the subscribe button right now. Every video we put out is built the same way. Real facts, different perspectives, zero spoon feeding. The next one is already being built. You do not want to miss it.